Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. We got a busy, long day ahead. Got some great things going on. I'd like to start this morning with some business to be sure we get that took care of. If anyone still needs to set up their posters, you can set that up during the break if you're not already set up. I see a few back there already. We're going to be in this room up here today till about 4:30. But there are, if you need to take a call, a Zoom, or you need other stuff on the floor below us, there's also some places if you need to make a call or take a break, that you're welcome to do that. We have plenty of resources around here. Anyone who needs help, look for people with the blue lanyards. These blue lanyards are the folks here from UNC, and they'll be welcome to help you. I'd be remiss if I didn't say right now how much great work the folks at the OBCR's office and the Vice Chancellor's office and the RDMC group have been doing to make this a smooth process. So they're ready to help. They would love to help you. Just ask somebody with a blue lanyard, and they're happy to help. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't thank all the people that helped make this happen. We had a great reception last night at the planetarium. We saw the planetarium show, the Carolina skies, and we learned a lot about our galaxy and our universe. And it was a fabulous thing to see. And I said this last night, but to show how we're all in this together. We're just one small dot in this massive universe, and we're all here to solve problems together. And this is the best group that I've ever worked with for many decades that do that as a team. It is just such a collegiate group. I've told 100 people about it. I think it was one of the first Dataverse conferences I said that it feels like a family, and it really does. And it is a family of folks that we've been working on, trying to work with data and make research better and make it transparent and achieve that gold standard of research. Well, with that said, I also want to thank some of the sponsors. The UNC Global, Dr. Barbara Stevenson gave us a talk last night and helped sponsor the reception, as well as Top of the Hill. They gave us a keg, so we had some libations last night, which was very nice of them. We also would like to thank the UNC School of Data Science and Society. Stan and his group were very gracious to help us out with sponsoring things here, as well as the OBCR's office with all the help. We couldn't have done it without all the great help here. So on behalf of the OBCR's office and the Research Data Management Corps, I'd like to welcome everybody to Chapel Hill. Welcome everyone to the Carolina Club here. Also, we're very excited because this lineup is very exciting. We've got a lot of great talks going on here, and we're really excited to be back with this Dataverse family. UNC has been working over the last few years to consolidate and enhance its data management services here with the creation of the RDMC now, and coordinating with all the folks here on campus, the libraries and everyone else. We're trying to pull together our data services here. We're very excited about what's going on here. We also realize that Dataverse plays a very central role here, serving as our data repository, a common catalog to help us identify where our UNC research assets are. Second to our people, data is probably the second most valuable thing we have. Our staff and faculty do work on those data, and without that data, they wouldn't be able to do the great work they do. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce Dr. Stefano Ikas, who will moderate and introduce our keynote panels. Stefano is Director of the Data Science and Product Research at the Harvard University Institute for Quantitative Social Sciences. He is also the Managing Director of the Dataverse Project and Executive Committee member of the OpenDP Project. He serves also as affiliate faculty at the Kempner Institute for the Study of Natural and Artificial Intelligence. He was formerly a full professor of statistics at the University of Milan. He founded the Data Science Lab and led academic programs in data science and finance. He's a member of the core team from 1999 to 2014. His research spans causal inference, stochastic processes, and AI for policy. He has also co-founded many startups, and especially in social media analytics and quantitative finance. So without further delay, I'll let Stefano give us a quick welcome and introduce our panelists.
Yeah, thank you, John, for the presentation, and welcome everyone. First of all, let me thank John, UNC, and all the people who made this meeting possible. I know it's a huge work, and it's the 11th time we have this Dataverse community meeting, so thank you so much for making this happen. So today we are having a panel. The title is Building Together, a community built data ecosystem for the community. And so we have three great panelists. One is Stalin Halt, which was just introduced. He is Dean of UNC School of Data Science and Society. Then we have Maria Estorino, UNC Vice Provost for University Libraries and University Librarian. And then Penny Gordon Larsen, UNC Vice Chancellor for Research, and William R. Kennan Jr., Distinguished Professor at UNC Department of Nutrition. So I invite you on stage. Now I will briefly introduce the speaker. And I have prepared with John some questions for you or for us. I would like to keep this very informal, like a discussion. So we start discussing between us, and then everyone can chime in and put questions or share their ideas. So let me. It's very short now, that's why. So let me introduce Stan. So thank you, Stan, for being here. John, Stan Hall was named inaugural dean of the School of Data Science and Society at UNC Chevening. Previously, he was director of the Renaissance Computing Institute, RENCI, since 2009, where he played a pivotal role in forming the National Consortium for Data Science, and develops iRods, a well-known open source data management software. He continues to contribute as an executive advisor and domain scientist for Team Science and RENCI, and as the Associate Director of Informatics and Data Science at NC, North Carolina Translational and Clinical Science Institute. Alt is passionate about leveraging data science, like me, to tackle pressing challenges in our healthcare and digital system. He previously led the Ohio Supercomputer Center, which I've been a pleasure to use. Thank you for this as well. And taught electrical and computer engineering at the Ohio State University. So Stan holds degrees from genetics and Clemson University. So I will start with the first question to you, Stan. So all the panels are from UNC, and the reason why John chose this panel is because UNC has really fostered the culture of collaboration around the resources, around the data sharing, building infrastructure for supporting data and research. And that's why we are having this discussion here. So maybe the first question is, why is data management so important, and why are we having so many conversations about it at this time?
Sure, thank you, Stefano. So data sharing and data careful collection, I think is absolutely essential. And I've come to realize that when we decided to name the new school the School of Data Science and Society, that at the time we discussed the and society pretty extensively. And I've come to realize that that was a really excellent decision. And it's an excellent decision because increasingly data is a motive force in our society. And it's not always for the public good. And so I think it's incumbent upon us who believe in the value of science to position ourselves so that we have a clear understanding of how we want to shape the future of the academy through data. And I think it's very important that we do so by shaping our data for the public good. And so SDSS cares deeply about what you're doing here at this conference, this workshop. What Dataverse has done, and I would argue that IROS and Red Cap, and we have other instances of open source efforts to do data collection better, okay? But we're in an era, and we were already coming to this era where the amount of data that we can produce is far in excess of what we can consume. That we were talking about this at our table earlier today. I have a new grandson, and my daughter's taking pictures and videos at a rate that I fear I won't even be able to look at all, okay? And yet, it's easy for us to store those things, but it's not always easy, even though Google has made some incredible, good steps in the direction of finding anything you want. It's not always easy to psychologically be able to wind your way through the challenges of the data you collect. And this is particularly important when we as scientists, whether we be social scientists or humanities, somebody in the humanities that's curating a dance or a musical, all of this data ends up being digital data. And it's data that has a primary purpose for which it was produced and collected in its original form. And then later we find out that there's another reason why we want to be using the data for other purposes. And it's through putting data collections together that we can find real insights into data-driven decisions. And so I think that we increasingly have to focus our attention on the fact that we have to find ways of collecting data in ways that allow us to put it together with other collections so that we can reach deeper conclusions about the very complex problems that are presented to society.
Thank you, Sam.
It's a little long-winded, I apologize.
No, this is just to warm up the panel. So next, I'd like to introduce Penny from Larsen. She is Vice Chancellor of UNC for Research. And before taking the question, I would like to give the opportunity to Penny to introduce herself a bit better than I did. Apologies. And she also, if she wants to present something, that please.
Okay, so I'm very happy to welcome everybody here. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Research. That means I oversee all of the research at the university. And I'm also a researcher myself. And so I came to this university 26 years ago as an investigator. My training was in human biology, and I worked with a data set that I collected myself. I knew every participant in that data set. I specifically came to UNC so that I could learn about how to analyze big data. And so over the course of my career, I've watched the incredible proliferation. I had no idea when I came to this university that I would be working from my own computer using the transcriptome, the genome, the microbiome, the metabolome, and all of this data on what people consume, all of their nutrients, and images of their body fat and their bone mass and their lean body tissue. I had no idea I would be able to do all of that. And when I came here, the thing that I came here as a postdoc, so I didn't intend to be here more than 2 years. But when I got here and I saw the collaborative environment that we have at Carolina, and the fact that I could learn from people who handled all different kinds of data, it was just incredible. And I think that that really relates back to what we have here and what we have through not just the Research Data Management Corps and folks like John Crabtree and his team, but the library and Odom Institute, the Carolina Population Center, our healthcare system. And when we think about the power that we can leverage with all of these data that we have and the willingness to collaborate across these different disciplines and fields, you really begin to open up a whole new realm of innovation and collaboration that is the future of research, period. And we here, I think, have a lot of really unique skills and environment to make that happen from Carolina and out extending to the entire world. And we've seen that with Dataverse and what brings all of you here. And the long history of the skill in being able to handle data. And what we've done, I think successfully for several decades here, is to really leverage data as an asset. And when we think about data as an asset, it begins to open incredible doors to progress, to making people's lives better, whether it's the air that they breathe, the water they drink, the healthcare that they receive. It's an incredible opportunity to leverage these data as assets in ways that we've never been able to do before. And so by creating the ability and the infrastructure to do that, we are the wave of the future. And so I'm really excited to be here and to be talking with all of you about these topics.
And related to this spending, so data, research data is an asset, and so asset needs to be managed. And then the user question is, why we do this? What's the return of investment of this effort? Do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, the return on investment is extreme, and we see that, day in and day out. We're working really hard right now to create a platform that will allow us to have patient data that we can bridge with things like I was talking about, the genome, the transcriptome, all of the image data that you have on individuals, the reward signaling pathways in the brain, everything that we can think of, to be able to bring those data together to effectively manage them and make them private and secure in a way that investigators from all different disciplines can put the power of their own research skills to bear on creating better care for a patient. And that's just one example. I mean, we're doing this across the board with drug discovery, with chemical discovery, with material science, chemistry, and so forth, to create, better environments and better ways of leveraging the social data to, identify the populations that are at greatest risk, the barriers to access. And so bringing the power of data back to protect individuals and give them better health, better quality of life.
So, and related to what you just said, yesterday I attended another conference, and the director of the Campaign Institute for Artificial and Natural Intelligence was showing how data created to actually study the mechanism with which the brain gets rewards from any action is now being used, the same data, in AI. So to train the next generation of models to understand how the network that we have to describe, that we used to describe this mechanism, is actually can be used for the new generation of AI models. So that's the value of data that we store, and we will see in the future what they're used for. So next one is Maria Turino. So Maria is UNC Vice Provost for University Libraries and University Librarian. Of course, library and librarians are the core piece of managing information, and data is also information, of course. And Maria, I let you introduce yourself a bit better than I did, and then I have a question for you.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for pronouncing my name so correctly and beautifully. I really appreciate that. And I just want to also thank my colleagues for the invitation to be here with you all to talk, in this conversation about the research data ecosystem. I will say that I've been university librarian for just about 3 years, but I came to Carolina to head the Special Collections Library. I'll tell you a little bit about me. My background is in history and in archives and library science, and so getting invited to something like this makes me, I think I bring a perspective that might be a little bit different from my co-panelists and perhaps some of you in the room, and I hope that it will be helpful to the conversation. The libraries here at Carolina are the largest research collection in the Southeast, #1 biggest. So it's been a long part of our reputation is the size of our collection. And a big part of that is our special collections. We have a very large rare book and archival repository. And so for me, one of the entry points into conversations about data management and sharing, frankly, starts with our collections, because we're sitting on a very large and very unreadable data repository in archives and in special collections. And so for the library, we think about, our own needs around data management and data sharing, but then also the communities that we interact with. And inviting me here, I think, recognizes, and thank you also for mentioning library as a core piece, the vital role that we play in the research data ecosystem. And I think it's not just because of our information organization and metadata, expertise. I think it's also because we provide expertise for researcher support and instruction. We help our various constituents navigate an increasingly complex data environment and sharing requirements. We also provide infrastructure for long-term access and preservation. But I think that one of the things that makes our contributions to this ecosystem distinct is our values. So we think about open access and equitable access. I think those are, libraries are, long-term advocates for equitable access and equitable resources available to researchers, including not just faculty, but also students and across all disciplines. And another value that I think really strengthens our ability to participate is collaboration. The very nature of our work requires us to reach across our campuses, but also collaborate with each other. Like, as long as libraries have existed in an academic context, they have collaborated with other libraries, because we early on recognized that in the vast universe of knowledge, no one library could bring it all to any one particular campus. And so we collaborate well, and it's a foundational kind of value. I'll also just add that I think another way in which we enter this conversation is that our commitments support compliance, but are not exclusively focused on compliance and compliance requirements. And so we're also thinking about how to help researchers leverage publicly available data, and not just how to better manage and share institutional data. And that kind of use is increasingly critical, right, to advancing scholarship, and especially in today's environment where data is becoming, and access to data is becoming more and more precarious. So I think I'll pause there, and thank you for the opportunity to share a few opening comments.
So now I have a question for you. So first of all, I share with you the thing about getting the name pronounced well. Because I have the same problem, even with John, after 3 years. I can categorize this. So we said the librarians are very important, and especially when you come from the research side of it, and you think about data. For a researcher, publishing a paper is okay. They know they put their institution name and whatever metadata keywords, because they want their research to be discovered. And then if you publish a book, you want it in the library, and then the librarian will take care of making it available to everyone, or the publisher. But when it comes to data, it's always a pain. They don't like to do this data management part. And so that's why AI emerging tool are maybe helpful in the future, and I have a question for Sam later about this. But my point is, I know the library, they do a lot of work in trying to make data management and data management tools available to all, especially young researchers, because now it's an important part of their research field. So can you share the experience of UNC, or your experience, and what do you think about the possibility of making this data management tool even more accessible to young research?
Thank you. Yes. Well, before I talk specifically about UNC, I want to just mention, and you all may be familiar with the Association of Research Libraries, RAD's initiative, which was the Realities of Academic Data Sharing. Was an initiative that the association started in 2021 with funding from NSF and then later from IMLS. I'm pretty sure that their IMLS grant was terminated, unfortunately, so the phase 2 has been impacted by that. But the reason I bring it up is because they were really trying to help us all better understand how different campuses were approaching research data management and sharing, and how we could do that better. And one of the things that they found, I keep referring to my notes because I want to make sure I represent it well, is that support structures on campuses are often fragmented leading to duplicated efforts and unclear responsibilities. Also finding that researchers, no matter how many resources and services campuses might be offering, researchers do not often know how to find them. Excuse me. And so, key finding from the RAGS effort, and I think from our own experience, tells us that effective data management really requires an intentional, coordinated, campus-wide effort. And I think that's what we're all striving for, and are probably in different phases of achieving that. And so for the library, to your question, there's two things. So I'll talk a little bit about UNC now. We have a library data services matrix team. And what that means is that across our subject experts, so libraries, if I don't want to assume that you all know how libraries work. So if you're hearing things you already know, just bear with me. We often hire subject experts who serve as key liaisons to schools, units, departments. And we are fortunate here at Chapel Hill to have a really wonderful and strong health sciences library. Not only do we have that library, but it's part of the larger university library system, which is not that common. A lot of medical libraries are independent of the central library. The reason I say that is because we really then have a much more coordinated approach to how we think about research across the disciplines. Our library data services team has recently reorganized to have a more matrix approach, right? So collaboration has to start within our own organization. And what that means is that we're building upon the strengths of the services that we always provide. They kind of center around two things. One is consultations, right? So when you have subject matter experts, that means that a researcher has someone that they can go to who maybe is fluent in their research language, who can help answer questions. And a lot of our consultation services sometimes answer the question, but frankly, sometimes are making warm and adequate referrals. And so a lot of what libraries do is sit at these intersections where we are not just interested in providing the service, but in making sure that researchers and other constituents are getting to the right service wherever it may be offered and wherever it may exist. The other kind of core component of our service model is instruction. And so again, liaison librarians, but then also technical experts that we hire, like GIS experts and data scientists and, and data visualization experts and machine learning experts, provide instructional support in two ways. One is course related. So the faculty member asks us to deliver some sort of content in the context of a course that they're teaching. But we also do a lot of what we call co-curricular instruction. And those are whole series of webinars and courses that we offer on specific topics that support researchers. And so that includes research data management sharing. It includes systematic reviews. It includes generative AI. And sometimes our referrals are also within our organization because we manage institutional repository, and we have experts that can help with those kinds of questions as well, especially for researchers where we are the first point of contact, right? A lot of researchers, a lot of disciplines have a lot of their own infrastructure within their departments or within their schools, but there's a lot of disciplines where that's not the case. And the library really is the front door. It's where the first questions get asked, and we're especially prepared to be able to help them.
Okay, thank you. So now we will have a second round of questions from myself, and then I will open the discussion to the audience. If you have questions or thoughts, or other things to share around this topic, and if not, I have lots of questions in myself. We can get to the end of the session. So, Sam, I mean, we all essentially mentioned that the word AI, what we were discussing, and this is now a buzzword. It will be said many times at this conference as well. But now with all these, say, new emerging or transformative research methods and AI, generative AI support, AI is also producing new data. So we have synthetic data, synthetic experiments, and things like that. So, what do you think are the additional challenges the researchers will need to address when dealing with this data, when treating this data, or when produces this data. If you have any thoughts,
So I have many thoughts about this topic. So leading up to, let's say, 2022, we knew that data was becoming increasingly important and that the desire of funding agencies as well as other pressures were leading us to the conclusion that we had to do something different with our data. We have not, by and large, made the transition as completely as we need to, by any stretch of the imagination. Then in 2022, approximately, generative AI came on the topic of every conversation we have in the scientific universe or any other universe for that. And so that, in some sense, put the value of the data even more in the forefront of how we might think about utilizing our data in a new and very distinct way. And it's not just the data that we collect as scholars. It's also the data that we collect about our students. It's the data we collect about our administrative tasks, our operational tasks. All of this now is at least a potential source of significant new insights because we have a new team member. And the team member is an artificial assistant. So if we didn't quite get the memo earlier that science is becoming team science, the days of doing science by yourself is, I think, pretty limited, although there's still some people who will do it and do it quite successfully. But I think increasingly science is becoming team science. And one of your science team members is going to be an artificial assistant. And that artificial assistant is going to be essential to your success because the volume of the data that we should have curated and put into a form that can be utilized by a generative large language model is going to be huge. And it's data at the scale that we cannot, as an individual or even a group of individuals, really go about collecting and understanding that data. Now, that brings up an issue of trust. So we have to think very hard about how we're going to trust this artificial assistant. And we have to build up a sense of reliability in the answers we get. And so we're going to have to be very critical thinkers about how we use these tools. This is further complicated. I was talking a little bit about this earlier, that many of the new large language models, let's just pick OpenAI as an example. They have so many models out now that it's hard to keep track of the labels, okay? And each of those models have been, as far as I can tell, and I'm trying to read furiously every weekend to try to not fall farther behind. Every one of those models is being built by a group within OpenAI that is, in some sense, not necessarily well integrated into the whole. And so they have different thinking about what an artificial assistant should do. Not all of them are chat GPTs. They may all be labeled that, but they're not expecting you to chat with them the same way consistently. So the ones that do deep research, which is the ones that we need to understand in a much more cohesive way, require you to give it a much greater grounding by writing long, complex prompts. And those prompts are you asking your assistant to go do a very complex task. And so once we start to use these tools given to us right now by these very large, well-financed companies, we're going to realize we want to use these tools for our own purposes, on our own data. And so I was trying to, listening to my colleagues talk about this, what are some of the big data sets that are here on this campus? Well, obviously, EHR data and imagery, all of the data that has to do with our healthcare system, and we're fortunate that our healthcare system is in the forefront of using generative AI and large language models in a safe way to really improve patient care, and they have the numbers to show it. But we'll have data, we're going to have data soon that's from the Gaia telescope. That's going to be a massive amount of data where the telescope is taking pictures of the sky over and over again for the past 15 years. And we're gonna have every lit up place in the sky available to us to be able to observe, and we're gonna find phenomena there that has never been observed before. And that will tell us something about the origins of the universe and how things actually get built out of raw matter. We have the history of the South that's digitized in our special collections. I think the largest collection of digitized information about the South anywhere in the world. And it's garnered some attention from outside folks. Ask Maria to tell you the story, okay? We have AdCert data that's produced at Renzi and other places that is focused on how storm surges hit our coastal line. And how does that interact with the water that is falling on an inland and rushing out to the sea? And how does that get combined together? And that's been used to make decisions about where to move battleships and where to have people evacuate to during the pandemic when a hurricane was hitting. We have massive amounts of oncology data, okay? We have brain images, and the list goes on and on. If we can't harness this new assistant to help us figure out how all of these data collections are put together and how we realize the value of these things collectively for us to understand ourselves better, because the history of the South, our electronic health record, oncology, all of those things are directly related. There's a historical precedence for our healthcare right now, our health state right now. So thinking about all of these things in a complex, sophisticated way, and being able to use the assistants to make progress on hard questions about hard problems where we do have data is, I think, essential, and it's our job to make this transition, and it is so hard to do that.
Thank you, Sam. I agree completely. Now the second question for Penny. So again, I want to go back to the title of the panel. So this is about creating an environment, a social environment within an institution where all people can work together to realize the big picture of science or knowledge. So can you tell us how UNC is leveraging university-wide economies of scale to provide the resources which are needed to continue cutting-edge research?
Sure. So I'll step back to the regulatory domain of research and the new regulations around data sharing and data access. And I'm going to also mention, although it wasn't quite the issue at the time that those new regulations went into place, but the political landscape and the lack of trust in science and universities in general that we're hearing about now. And part of that is, understanding the evidence base and getting the evidence back out to the community and the data back out to the community. So if the public has a question and they want to understand that there is an access there for either them or others to replicate or investigate. And so when those regulations came into play, we were in an incredible position here at Carolina that we already had Dataverse. We were already thinking about the access to data. We already had the collaborative landscape to be able to think about how we create those bridges to access across campus. And so, it was a sort of a natural extension of the work that we were already doing, but at the time we thought, how do we, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, how do we think about the data as assets and really up the ante for creating those pathways of access across our campus and beyond, out to the public, out to our collaborators across the world. And in doing so, creating these kinds of platforms, we already were doing a lot of the platform-based work, but creating these platforms where there were points of entry and access and the ability to create data sets from any kind of data that were put on those platforms. And so by creating them, drawing more people in, because a lot of those platforms we were working on were things that were federally funded or otherwise, specific uses, like the NHLBI, Biodata Catalyst, and other kinds of things that we were creating. So thinking about that, but thinking about how we do that on our campus with everyone. Everyone's data goes in, everyone's data, we begin to catalog and identify and understand and share the availability. This data set is available, here's who's working on it, here's how you access it, here's the privacy regulations for it. By doing that across every single kind of data set that we have, we are creating these economies of scale for people to be able to combine data sets in ways that you couldn't conceive of before. So if I think about what Stan was just talking about in terms of the AI, you can think about the use of the HR data for a specific use. If you're thinking about the clinical data where you want to optimize patient care by saying, here's patient X, speed up what we know about them in my chart, yada, yada, yada. But you can actually think much more broadly about this. And so, as I alluded to before, my field is obesity research. We have these new GLP-1 drugs. The GLP-1 drugs that you probably heard about, originally developed for diabetes, very good at regulating weight. They have side effects and so forth. They hit the reward signaling pathways in the brain gut communication to keep you from overeating. So if you have a patient and you want to bring them in and you want to help them with weight loss, part of what you can do is use this drug to, turbocharge, but part of it is a very social, environmental, and context-driven thing. So you take that patient and instead of just saying, I'm going to get the dose right, which is sort of what you could do with a traditional AI, EHR clinical care framework, you can take that patient and you can say, here's where the patient lives. Here's the kinds of things they're going to experience, the fast food they might see on their way to work. We know that they're going to go to childcare. Here, they're going to get to childcare. They're going to spend time there. There's going to be treats and sweets out there that they usually have there. Here's, when they go home in the supermarket they're going to go to and what's available there. So you can take that patient and then you can say, what's the right dose for this patient? If you can create a microdosing pharmacy that is then, a living pharmacy internal to the individual with that drug in it, you can then say, this person is going to get these cues when they drive past McDonald's. We are going to give them a decision support information on their handheld device that says, we know you're hungry right now. Don't stop at that McDonald's. Keep going. You can do it. They get to the sweets. They know that there's going to be sweets involved in the next place that they go. They again give them that message. They take them to they stop at their grocery store on the way home, and their device can say, here's the things that we saw you eat earlier today because we've taken pictures of your plate. And here is, you've had too much protein, you've had too much carbs. Here's what we're going to give you, a recipe for pick up broccoli, pick up, lean chicken, go home. Here's the recipe. Here's what you need. Here's the timing at which you need to make that, and so forth. So you can combine all of these different social and environmental things beyond the use of the single data set or the single thing. And it's that ability to leverage across all of those data sets that's really, really important in those economies of scale. So it's not just creating an economy of scale for a specific discipline, but how is it that you can combine all the disciplines, combine all the data, and be able to leverage all of these data to really make a difference in people's health and well-being.
Thank you. The last question for Maria before opening everyone. So my first question and first answer, we first discussed about how to essentially put data into repositories from the research, but then there is also the access part. And so the library plays again an important role in making data discoverable beyond the platform itself. And so I'd like to know about the steps that academic libraries have been taken to help researchers to access these resources.
Thank you. Yeah, so we talked about in terms of services, our libraries are sometimes the first point of connection, and I think that extends for access, whether you're using the library or not. We're creating all sorts of ways in which we are trying to get information to our campus and our research constituents in the environments in which they operate, right? And so, for example, at our library, we worked to optimize our institutional repository to ensure integration with Google Scholar, right? Because Google Scholar is where people are doing their research as much as we would like for them to start with us. We're taking the mountain to them. So that's just one example, but, a lot of what we do, I think what I'd like to suggest is that, there's extensibility to the work that libraries do. And what we think about as collections is very broad and diverse, right? It starts with what we all think about as library collections, right? Like books, journals, whether they're analog or digital. But over the centuries, library collections have become much more diverse, and data is part of that. And so in the same way that we might, it's funny because I get more and more feedback from faculty wanting some really fundamental information literacy support for their students. They're finding that undergrads are coming, and there's a point to this, they're finding that undergrads are coming in just not really knowing how to use a library, how to use a catalog, how to do research. And the reason I bring this up is because that's a really fundamental part of what we do, and data slots into that, right? So, we're going to provide training on how to use data discovery platforms, right? Like IQSS or government portals like data.gov. I don't know if you all use our subject guides, live guides, lib guides, at your institutions, but we put a lot of work into creating guides, both for course specific needs, but also for broader information. Like, for example, our guide to alternative sources for federal data, right? So when we, as you know, and you may well be involved in Dataverse efforts, whether it's because of federal moves that are disappearing data or just data disintegration or decay. Libraries sometimes participate, but sometimes they're just tracking on that so that researchers know where they can find the data as it moves across the digital landscape, or maybe as it slips off of it. We collaborate with faculty and researchers, again, to embed data literacy into not just classroom instruction, but also research workflows. And so, for example, we participate in the School of Medicine's responsible research conduct, I forget what it's called, conduct of responsible research. I forget the right order of words there, but we provide training from the library on in terms of that context. I also think that one of the most important things we do is that we collaborate with consortium organizations like SPARC to advocate for open data policies and for infrastructure. Libraries don't often have the greatest visibility on our own campuses or even in this larger landscape. And so this is again where collaboration comes in, where the strength of all of our collective voices can help elevate these issues to our federal and our other kind of funding partners, and even on our own campuses. Yeah, so these are just some examples of how libraries integrate public data into the work that we do, so that researchers can more efficiently locate them and use them, right, to produce not just knowledge, but their own relevant data sets.
Okay, thank you, Maria. So I have one thought before opening to the public, the discussion. So the three of you talk about there are many data around, and there are many resources. They can be put together, and some AI tools start putting together data. But then there is the concept of trust. How can we trust that this data is being matched, I don't know, towards HR data or medical data and so forth? So in my view, as a manager working on the Dataverse project, I see that we have lots of data sets. Most of them are disconnected between them, so they are silos, and they're silos with respect to the literature. And so I don't know if you have thoughts about what we can do next to make this data more connected, even within the repository or within the literature or in general science.
I'm just gonna jump in and say, that's the dream of the research data management core that we have on campus, is that by understanding all of the data that we have and how to access and use it, you can combine those data. And so that's the desire for us here, to break down those silos and to be able, on this collaborative campus, to be able to say, oh, I see this person has data set X, Y, and Z. I'd love to figure out how to bring that in. And for people like me and Stan and Maria to be able to say, you should talk to you should talk to this person, you should talk to that person. You can solve this problem together. And by creating, I think, opportunities for people to come together around data, around problems, specifically trying to overcome challenges. If we take a challenge, any given challenge, environmental contamination, in water, and you bring people together who have different kinds of experience and different kinds of data, just put them in a room and say, solve this problem. What do you need? What kind of data would you want? And then having the infrastructure to be able to readily access and use those data, combine those data. And by thinking ahead about documenting the data that we have, how you might harmonize, combine, merge different kinds of data sets together in advance, then you can just speed the time at which you can pull these data sets together and begin to access them.
I'll just jump in and add my 2 cents. Penny referenced earlier the Biodata Catalyst platform that NIH is assembling using teams across the country that include teams from here at UNC. And that's an attempt to create a platform where all of the dbGaP data can be presented for people to use in a more facile fashion than what you could do when it was in dbGaP originally. And then increasingly they're adding additional data to that, and they're having to confront this challenge of the harmonizing and the getting the semantics to be consistent from study to study or from collection to collection, whether the collection is about heart, lung, blood diseases or sleep or other types of problems that you would have potentially. And so one of the things that's occurring is that there's now emerging at NIH at least some significant amount of interest in knowledge graphs. And knowledge graphs are at the foundational level of much of what large companies do. In fact, I've read somewhere that you can really, if you want to understand the secret sauce of IBM or Google or Meta, you need to see the knowledge graph, because they've figured out how to put knowledge into graph form in order to begin working on schema and metadata techniques that allow them to have a consistent vocabulary, whether the vocabulary is designed by one group or another group. How do we harmonize their 2 schemas? So there's things that we know and are emerging. It's just that they're hard to use, really hard to use. I've worked on one team called Data Translator I was there for 8 or 9 years. Very successful group. We continued to get funding. But it was manual, a lot of effort. We have a breakthrough. Microsoft Copilot works. It works on our data. So here at this campus, we bought a limited number of subscriptions to Microsoft Copilot, and I can go into Teams, and I can make sure that my Teams folders have the data that I've created. For example, all of my PowerPoint slides that I've created over the past, I would hate to tell you how many years since PowerPoint was invented. Okay. And now I can ask it to create a presentation, a draft of a presentation in the style that's typical to me, and I can be very specific about what I asked it to do. And lo and behold, it will do a pretty good job of making the first draft. It'll do the same thing creating a Word document. It'll do the first reasonable job of creating the first Excel spreadsheet that I'm then going to analyze using Python or something like that. And it'll help me write the Python code. So these tools that are now emerging are a breakthrough. We just got to figure out how to use them and figure out how to pay for them, which is not a small feat, and figure out what we need to do to our own data as well as the data that we help collect in teams, so that we can start to organize ourselves using the tools that are coming out of these large companies, which frankly, I don't know that we can compete with. I mean, they have so many people on this problem that we're challenged to scale even approximately. So let's at least try to use what's coming out of these large companies for the benefit of the public good in the academy.
Thank you. Your question and the really insightful answers that my colleagues have shared, frankly, bring to mind not an answer to your question, but another question, which is, what is the motive and incentive for doing that? And I think that that's a lot of what we continue to struggle with. You know, our funders tried one way, right, which was to create a mandate for how we share data. And I think that the sharing gets to the issue of trust, obviously, Penny, that you were talking about, but also in creating more transparency is opening up the bridges across the silos, right? When you can access and, you know, the data, you might then have more incentive to collaborate across the board. But I don't know, especially in this funding environment in which we're operating, and the uncertainty around these mandates, the fact that these mandates are unfunded, and there is no yet successful model for how to really do the integrated kind of work that you're talking about. I think that there's still a lot of work ahead of us that is not just technical, it's also cultural, as I think you were alluding to, but also cultural, not just to the way in which researchers work, but cultural to higher ed in terms of what is valued. And that's kind of what I mean by incentive. You know, if you take a very like rudimentary consideration that what is valued is what is funded, then we have a lot of work to do still in this area.
Let me add some thoughts to this. So now there are emerging technologies or standards like the Model Context Protocol, which have been promoted, and Dataverse is now .NET. There will be a talk about this, which will make the agent able to interact with any content essentially in a programmatic way. And other metadata standards like Rosan ML, which is another, say, variation of the schema.org metadata schema. But I think we still need to compete with these big companies, not in producing the next big thing in terms of modeling. I think we need to compete on how to control these models. So the transparency is very important, because even if I ask Pilot or any other tool, let's say, do the work for me, I'm never sure that he is selecting the right thing. There can be lots of bias, lots of things we don't know about, that might be good or might be evil, we don't know. And so that's why the human in the loop is always very important for me. And that's why, for example, me coming from an open source community like the art community and now the Dataverse Project, I think we should leverage what these big companies can do. So we cannot train a big model, but we can use it when it's trained, and then we can, how to say, make it work the way we want, and we can supervise the entire process of generating whatever information we want from them. So, and there is also, I think, no librarian with the experience of Maria or any other librarians in the room at Meta, IBM, or Google, because this is not their job. I mean, this is not the core business. Core business is to sell products. And even the knowledge graph is based on some technical aspects of it, but it lacks all the human say knowledge, which is still hard to quote, I mean, to date. So let's not give up. And now I open the stage and the floor to everyone who wants to watch.
Before you do that,
Yeah, of course. I mean,
I just
let's
want to
make
say
it
that,
very formal.
yeah, no, I think that's that, you know, the discovery element. I mean, this is one reason why I think the academy and universities and independent research institutes, even to a certain extent, are really critical, because it's where the discovery happens, and it's not going to happen in a market-based company. And the other thing is that you need to have the methodologists, the data people, and the content experts. You need to have all three. And a lot of companies don't have the content expertise that they really need, or sometimes the methodological expertise to be able to do the sanity check to make sure that the things that are being found are reality and biologically and socially based.
And
There's a question from the online
Okay.
audience, and I believe this is for Stan. A question about knowledge graph integration with LLMs. Do you have some recommendations on how to deal with infrastructure, structural, and semantic drifts happening with concepts and knowledge graphs? So they're dealing with extremely unstable, space-breaking traditional language models.
So I certainly do not consider myself an expert in this space. I think that there are tools that are emerging, like MCP, that allow us to create agents to be able to start knitting together knowledge graphs. And again, I think that Penny has a very good point. We need to be very thoughtful and careful about how we entrust the output that are produced by machines. But I do think it holds some promise for us to be able to use these tools, these agents, to be able to do some of the things we used to have to do manually. And of course, as you do it manually, you're doing kind of an online, real-time check of your decision making, and you're using human judgment and methodologies and social context. That's not going to be in the protocols that MCP embodies unless we make it so. And so I think that we have to build up a new set of tools. Let's not give up. Let's please not give up, because I think it's essential for the future of society for us not to give up. The academy is a core place where we have to be able to figure out how to use these tools that are fortunately coming out of big companies that have a profit motive. But we don't have a profit motive. We have a motive to discover new knowledge and pass that knowledge along to our students and to other scientists so that we can continue to do good. So let's find methods that are emerging right now that you all are talking about and figure out how we can harness the power that is being presented. And to some degree, MCP is a good example of an open source standard that we can utilize. And it's open, it's going to be used across a number of different models and a number of different companies. So let's be all in and figure this out. It's a brave new world. I don't know about you all, but I feel a weekly anxiety that I'm falling farther and farther behind. There seems to be so much change for it. I don't know if that's a very good answer, but that's all I have.
let me say that I didn't mean to say that you were at Keynote. Although it was provocative for all of us. I'm sure you're not giving up.
Hi, thank you. First of all, very much of what you said really resonated with me. I'm Oliver Berthold. I'm working at the Central Library of the Research Center in Munich, Germany. So especially thank you for saying all these things about how libraries work and how crucial the role of libraries in like this is. My question to you is like the current situation, or what you're talking about is like, it made me feel on edge and putting up signs like saying and software, and the other sign would be and reproducibility. And like what I missed from what you talked about is like you talked a lot about the chances and opportunities and stuff like that. Is a little bit, especially also regarding to like the things you said about AI and this new teammate, how crucial it then will be to have reproducibility in all of this, like make science reproducible. And for reproducibility, you will need to also not just think about data and text applications, obviously, but also have, for example, research software-ready libraries. So libraries also taking into account that there is software out there that people write. And I would like to know from the four of you, like, what is your take on this? What is the future role with AI, with all the stuff that's going on research software, written by researchers, not software engineering experts usually, and the reproducibility aspect that is like the overarching theme of the talk.
And it's
I was so hoping somebody else would go first. So I can't help myself, but going to the word reproducibility is so central to a fundamental problem we have to address here. And this has come up in the context of some of these other programs that we were talking about. NIH would like to think that if you do a study about long COVID, that when you do the study over again, you get the same answers. But I don't think that's the case. I think the answers that are reasonably close. But, you know, our software base changes all the time. We're constantly updating, changing, and, you know, new libraries, et cetera. If we're using AI, we have a certain level of non-determinism that we have to accept the fact that it's going to give us a different answer almost every time. But is it qualitatively the same or effectively the same? So I think we have to figure out and think hard and long about these very difficult problems for which no one is incenting us to do this. When you do a reproduction, you may get a paper out of that reproduction. And in fact, people may point to early reproductions of important results like COVID-19 and the effectiveness of certain drugs, which I was fortunate enough to deal with folks at Harvard to reproduce the central COVID-19 result very early because we had the BBC platform to do it on. But nobody paid them to do that. They had to go do it on their own dime because they were interested in it from a scientific perspective. So somehow we have to think through how we're going to hold ourselves accountable and accept the fact that the way we used to do it, which is peer review, we're going to continue to do that, but we need to peer review some other stuff too. It's not just a paper. It's going to be peer reviewing the processes, the methodologies, and making sure that an answer on how to treat this particular type of tumor cell is consistent with other findings that may arise from different data sets. So, I mean, we are in a new scientific realm. This is a fourth or fifth paradigm, maybe. And I think we have to scramble to some degree and not give up, but look at the promise and the hope that we can take our mission and align it with the new tools and then figure out how to harness those tools in ways that greatly benefit us, just like fire revolution had. That, like when we electrified the world, that was a revolution. We're doing something at least at that scale right now. And we're in the middle of it, and it's very difficult to figure out how to swim through it. So somebody rest.
I will just say, like, you know, I think it did go back to what Maria was saying. This whole sense of proprietary software is a challenge. And even with, you know, self-designed software that we use for analysis in study projects, whether it's, you know, just simple code sharing, easy. But if it's more complicated and the investment that the investigators made to do it, I can understand that the incentives are reverse to share the software. And I think that if we can create the right incentive structures, I mean, I'll say for myself, I have spent my whole career getting over the fear that letting somebody know the secret doesn't hurt. It actually helps the competitive edge. And I work in genetic epidemiology, and we do a lot of this, and we do it with the proteomics, with the software for the microbiome, all of these different kinds of things. The more you share it and collaborate and replicate and help each other across these global consortia, the more the science accelerates and the more exciting work you can do and the more things you can do. And so it actually opens the world, whereas holding tight to the software closes the world.
Thank you for drawing that connection, Penny. I'll just say that this second phase of the RADS initiative, one of the key things that we were all very much looking forward to, because the first phase was really looking at costs, it was looking at mapping the landscape of where research data management and sharing was happening and how it was happening. One of the things that I looked at least I was interested in this second phase of the initiative was what is the evolution of research data management and sharing on our academic campuses? And one of the main suggestions that the libraries that were participating in that were making was that the evolution is integration with research integrity initiatives, right? For more adaptable, more responsive, and more sustainable efforts. So I think, I don't have an answer, but I think that that is the right question to be asking, and that is, goes to the issue of trust, and it goes to the issue of open access, and the whole reason behind it, you know, the libraries advocate for this, yes, because our budgets are killing us, right? Like the publishing ecosystem, we cannot afford it anymore. But we also do it because we fundamentally believe that open science benefits us all, right? And so I think that, you know, continue trending in those directions is gonna really matter.
Thank you. Before moving to other questions, I just want to remember everyone that at the end of this week, on Friday, there will be a roundtable around Dataverse. What does it mean? So we know what it means for repositories, what it means for data. And so it's a very community-driven discussion because no one can impose trust on anything. It needs two parties. And so the discussion will be around how to make it happen. Another thought that I have is that at the same conference yesterday, it was all about AI and things like that. The people from the so-called digital humanities. So these people, these researchers, they do the work on their own. So there is no team like we see in the hard science or even in social sciences now. And they only have one data point, one use case. Their research is not reproducible. They don't want to disclose anything about the research because it's all in their brain. And it's their thoughts that means for the research. But there is still the problem of conservation. And so this is another thing we have to think when we talk about data, research data. It's not just for reproducibility, but it's also for conservation and all this data rescue initiatives. At Harvard, we have now this, I mean, it's not public, we are not streamed. I know we are, but we are trying to rescue 10 petabytes of data from all the agencies in this country, and the problem there is that there is no metadata associated to this data. It's a bunch of CSV files in some very nested, hierarchically nested directories, and only those who have put the data there knows what exactly each data means, and these are high volumes of data. So there is a lot of work where, for example, AI and semantic knowledge graph and semantics discovery can be used for saving this data and making it available later for research. And the last thing about putting all data together, even if you put together open source data, which lives in silos, if you put many of them together, you start seeing people. You start disclosing the privacy of people, and this is another issue that we, as repositories or librarians or people who manage the data, have to consider when making data available. And I'm talking about non-sensitive data. There are many examples. This is what the DT project, Open DT project is trying to work on. So there are many challenges in this new era. I agree it's a new paradigm, and we have to work together. So any other questions from the room? Yeah, Jane.
I do have one online question regarding peer review and AI from the online audience. And then we'll get to the question. What if peer-reviewed papers are being reviewed with the help of AI, considering quote unquote innovation as outlines logic? It's the definition of innovation contradicts known research methods. So would that mean that really innovative papers will not be accepted?
So I don't know the extent to which AI is being used in reviews, but I think we would have to ensure that that the human part of the review is still integral. That peer review process is just really important. There's at this point only a certain extent to which AI can do that, and so there clearly needs to be, I know, a lot of more regulation around, or at least clarity and transparency around the use of AI in things like that are related to peer review. And I think it kind of touches a little bit on what you were saying about the humanities and the personal part of the experience of all of the qualitative parts of the world we live in, that, you know, that human part of all of this needs to come in, and the, you know, the full understanding of the evidence base that is possible through, through that, individual as opposed to AI. You know, as far as I know, there's not really a great AI trained model that would be able to do something like this yet.
So a couple events, Jim.
Sort of comment / question. So one of the things that Stan's anecdote about PowerPoint brought up is that, you know, if we had been telling him as a researcher that, you know, the standard answer would have been, Stan, as you make those PowerPoints, get them into Dataverse, get lots of metadata on them, put the keywords in, you know, describe what's in there, and do it well so you can use it later. And you just showed us that basically you didn't have to do any of that and you still get value out. And so, you know, and same thing, you know, Stephanie's got lots of data. We don't have the metadata, but in some sense, we almost don't, we need to get the data in now and worry about the metadata later, because we're going to be able to generate it with AI and stuff. So I guess, but that's sort of the comment. The question, I guess, is, are you, you know, as North Carolina in particular, thinking about policy changes and what you're going to ask the researchers to do to get stuff in? Because in some sense, if they just get it in there as a data dump, that's the important thing to do, because AI is going to be able to help, you know, annotate it later, or maybe it's the other way around, right? That because you can annotate it with AI now, you'll do it now anyway. But have you thought about those sorts of shifts in what you do?
I think there's distinctions between the cataloging and then, you know, the creating data for at least envision purpose. And so I think we need to do both of those. And the big question I think that you ask is really important. And that is, for a data dump, you know, are there going to be AI tools later to be able to leverage and use? And probably, but, you know, I think at this point, the kinds of data that I think we'd like to really be thinking about and setting up structures for are the data that are organized in a way that you are able to ask questions for multiple purposes. And there are certain kinds of data that work really well for that, and there's certain kinds of data that just don't as of yet. But if AI tools can give us access to data, particularly around qualitative data, I mean, it's just incredible power that that we would have to be able to add a variety of data into the kinds of data that we can, you know, really right now that we're able to archive and think about the harmonization and think about the use and the access and deal with some of the questions around privacy, transparency, accessibility of those data for purposes beyond which they were originally envisioned. And so I think we have a long way to go to get from some of the archiving for data that we don't quite know what to do with yet.
I'll just say that I would love for you to put this question in conversation with the work of traditional archives, because I will tell you, as someone who's worked in that field for over 20 years, that we went through this, where the approach was just bring it in the building and we'll deal with it later, because the goal was collect it so that we can preserve it and make it available. And there's a real technical debt and other kind of debt that you're incurring by doing that. And generations like ours are the ones that are now unable to do the creative work of developing collections and engaging them in the kinds of research and teaching that we need, because we're managing the debt that our predecessors left for us by just bringing it all in and we'll figure it out later. There are things in our building, our special collections. I hope you'll visit Wilson Library. It's not far from here. Make sure you go up to the top floor where you can visit our beautiful, or the third floor, Farrington Reading Room. But in that building, there are things that we brought in 50 years ago that are still untouched since they were brought in, and therefore unusable, undiscoverable, and we still carry the burden of preserving and storing those materials. So not to overstate the case, obviously I have a perspective here that is informed by a different kind of experience, and I don't have an answer for it, except that we talk a lot about curation. We talk a lot about having to make decisions now, appraising content, putting more effort into appraisal of content before we add it to our repository. And I can't help but think that there's robust conversation that could be had about operational impacts, right? Somebody somewhere, whether it's using generative AI or a human doing actual, metadata and curation work, somebody somewhere is going to have to be responsible for that, and we have to kind of think about that long term. So.
Maria, that is a very profound insight. So you were really asking, I think, is UNC going to create a data lake? Okay. And I think that's a great example of why you don't just pour everything into the lake. Because then you're taking on both technical debt and the actual real money expense of storing things you don't know how it is. Okay? I think one of the reasons why I see value using Microsoft's products on my own material is because I have been reasonably consistent in my naming of files for these 40 years, okay? So that there's at least some hints of information embedded in the file names. I will also tell you that I have, in hindsight, realized that probably the biggest mistake that occurred in the Unix operating system, which in many ways preceded all of the subsequent operating systems that we use, is that the file system did not have a sufficient degree of complexity so that we could put more metadata in our blobs. And had we done that and then been meticulous about labeling our scholarly work over the years, we would be way ahead of the game. Because we'd be able to understand ourselves better and not rewrite the same paper that you've written before, and go find bits and pieces and assemble and be a more productive scholar. And there have been disciplined scientists that have done that through the ages. They used to do it on index cards, and it was very successful. And when you were talking about the catalog, I was struck by my own experience. My first paid job was returning books to the library, putting them back in the shelves. And I remember this sense of discovery that when I wanted to look at a camping book and I turned around, I'd see something that has some relevance to that topic because the card catalog was organized creatively. And I missed that discovery. And I don't want to turn it over to Google or Perplexity or anybody else. I want to understand it.
We can take last question and then you have to close. Because this is the first session on the conference. Otherwise.
So I'm Catherine Skinner from Investment and Infrastructure, and my first thing to say is just that I love seeing this panel. In part because I've been working on an NSF-funded project for the last couple of years where we've been looking at research workflows, and we've been trying to bring together the libraries and the research offices and IT and other groups. And often we found, we've worked with 30 institutions, that those groups have never come together. UNC, they have, it's great. It's wonderful to see you all up here. Incentives are changing. We have a dramatic reduction in the amount of money that is going to be available to UNC or to any other single institution. We have hits coming from multiple sides at once. We have the EU not wanting to work with anybody in the United States right now. I just keynoted a conference over there. And the first question was, why would we ever work with the United States again? And that's a common sentiment right now. How do we, and how do you bond together with other institutions? Maybe first at the system level, you have the 19 or 21, I can't remember which it is, system entities within the UNC system. How do we start consolidating? And I say that very deliberately, it's not a nice word. But how do we start consolidating so that we can invest the few resources that we're still gonna have as time goes on in whether it's the data lake or whether it's selection principles, which I applaud, Maria, so that we're making wise investments and that we're doing them not as a single institution, but as networks.
I think that's a really important question. First, I will say that, I believe that there is a desire not to damage the research infrastructure of this country, even from our current administration. I think that we are likely going through a narrowing and a tough period, but that things are gonna get better. And I think that the strength and the competitiveness of our country depends on research and data and all of this that we've been talking about today. So I do think we're gonna wind up in a better place than we are, and the world is changing, and we're gonna adapt to it and survive. But that said, I do think that it is really important to be efficient and effective with the resources that we have. And that we do think about, like you said, the economies of scale and collaboration across institutions. And there's a lot of conversation happening from my vantage point in my community, and I'm sure that Maria will say the same for the librarians across the country, that we're having these conversations about how we think about data sharing and building bridges and coming together in the face of scarce resourcing. And that's a really important thing for us to do. And I think that data can lead us there, because we have been working on sharing infrastructure around data. And so it is a window in and a mechanism for us to have these kinds of conversations about how we bond together and create those pathways and shared resources. Across our, just one example at our institution, we have our core resources for, core laboratories and resources that we have at UNC, which we open at our institutional cost to our partner institutions. And we can build from things like that. And I know other, Florida does this, there are other states that do this with their institutions. And I think that we can take those scarce resources and find ways to collaborate, bridge, and open access beyond our own institutions.
I don't want to be responsible for derailing the schedule.
You have the right to work first.
Well, no, I mean, you've been engaged in some really intensive, national level work right now, and I think that is perhaps one positive outcome, is that, what is happening is not a retrenchment of, resource protection, but rather, a move towards greater collaboration across institutions to find solutions that benefit us all. I want to close by just saying that I have found a lot of inspiration and solace in my historian colleagues, because this is where the humanities and the people side of things can help us understand the long arc of history, and that it's very difficult to see that in the moment of great change that we're undergoing. But we've been through a lot of difficult things that we've come out of stronger and better. And that is my hope for this, is that whatever we learn from this experience will lead to more resource sharing, more collaborative, not just within our own institutions, right, but across higher ed.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. It has been a pleasure. I hope you enjoy this session. And now there's a break and the whole conference ahead of us. Thank you.